Hello Mind Mappers and welcome to the video. Today we're going to be going over The Little Book of Talent by Daniel Coyle, 52 tips for improving your skills. Now Daniel Coyle is of course also the New York Times bestselling author of The Talent Code, which is kind of the companion book here. This one is filled up with the tips that he learned while researching the Talent Code, and I wanted to bring that to you because I believe that there's a few tips in this book, in this mind map, that you can take away, put in your back pocket, and use every single day in your life. There's a lot of good information that we can learn from some of the world's most successful people in sports, in business, and etc. And a lot of it is contained right inside the tips in this book. With that, let's dive directly into the introduction. I pulled out a quote from the book that I believe gives us a good overview of what we can expect to learn here today. He says that what follows is a collection of simple, practical tips for improving your skills, taken directly from the hotbeds that I visited and the scientists who researched them. The advice is field tested, which of course we love here on this YouTube channel, scientifically sound, and most importantly, concise. Because when it comes down to it, we're all navigating busy, complex lives. Parent or teacher, kid or coach, artist or entrepreneur, we all want to make the most out of our time and energy. When it comes to developing our talents, we could use an owner's manual, something to say, do this and not that. We could use a master coach that tucks into our pocket. We could use a little book, and that's really what we're going over here today. Whatever talent you set out to build, from golfing to learning a new language to playing guitar to managing a startup, be assured one thing. You are born with the machinery to transform beginner's clumsiness into fast and fluent action. That machinery is not controlled by your genes, it's controlled by you. Each day, each practice session is a step towards a different future. This is a hopeful idea, and the most hopeful thing about it is that it's actually a fact. And really, what this book is to me is a book of little mental models for self-improvement. Such impactful little mental models that, again, you can tuck it into your pocket, you can take it along with you, and use it every single day. And, of course, it also is about how our brain is built for success, that we have the machinery available to us, and we're actually the ones driving. How you can use your brain to accomplish, learn, and create great things, which again is really what the channel is all about. It's all about how talent is actually created and not given, and about how we can learn new things. Mental models are different ways of looking at something that easily stick out in our minds, and mental models describe something that is almost universal, person to person to person, and they help us make changes in the moment without having to use a bunch of forethought. And that's why I think they're so impactful as well, is you can notice yourself in a certain situation, remember the mental model that Daniel Coyle and the Mind Map guy gave to you, and then you can put that mental model into action. The best part about this book, these mental models are already tested. Daniel Coyle wrote that smash hit, The Talent Code. Everyone loves that book. This book dives much deeper into the science and practice of how successful become that way. This book actually is something that you could reference quickly, but it also distills some of the information into its useful and actionable points. Like you said, you can tuck it into your pocket and use it every single day. I like to think about tucking it into your brain and being able to use it every single day with this mind map. With that, mind mapping, you can get the most out of the mind maps by following along. You can also find the process of how I mind map, plus all 50 plus mind map templates, including this one at the link down below. Following along will help you learn more, remember better, and apply these books to your life. With that, let's get directly into our first big idea, sweet spot. Daniel says in the book that there is a place right on the edge of your ability where you learn best and fastest, and it's called the sweet spot. And here's how you can find it. You've got 3 different zones. You've got your comfort zone, which is ease and effortlessness. You're working, but you're not really reaching or struggling when you're in your comfort zone. Percentage of successful attempts is above 80%. Then you've got the sweet spot, what we're talking about here today, which is a little bit frustrating. It's difficult, alertness to your errors. You can tell when you're making mistakes. You're fully engaged in an intense struggle, and as you're stretching with all of your might for a nearly unreachable goal, brushing it with your fingertips, and then finally reaching it again. The percentage of successful attempts inside of the sweet spot for learning is 50 to 80%. So 50% of the time you might be failing, or 20% of the time you might be failing. And then you've got this survival zone, which is confusion, desperation, overmatched, scrambling, thrashing, and guessing. You guess right sometimes, but it's mostly just luck. The percentage of successful attempts here is way below 50%. So of course we want to be in this sweet spot. We want to feel frustrated, we want it to be difficult, we want to be alert to our errors, but we don't want to be confused or desperate or just straight up guessing. So if we want to improve our skills as quickly as possible, of course, we want to find the sweet spot. So we need to pay attention to how difficult we're making our practice. When we practice things that are below our current level of ability, we actually don't get that much better. In fact, we might be playing below our level and actually staying below our level or reverting back to the level that we're practicing at. When we practice things that are far above our level, we struggle and we can't learn. The only times we're successful are when our guesses are right, which is of course not what we want. But when we find the exact right or create the exact right match for our abilities, that's the place where we're stretching, we're learning, we're fully engaged just to succeed 50 to 80% of the time. That's where we're going to learn, grow, and adapt the fastest. Now, some of us might think that we will learn best when we're way above 80% success, but you learn just as much, if not more, from your failures than you do from your successes. What you need to do is make sure that you're failing not because you're guessing the wrong answer, but what you're really doing is you're failing because you're brushing up against the very top limit of your ability. So how can we find this sweet spot in our lives? From my personal experience, it's all about paying attention to your mental state, right? So we talked about the percentage of successful attempts, but really what we're looking for here is these sensations that we're feeling in our mind while we're practicing. Are you feeling effortless or bored? Are you feeling awareness and flow? Or are you feeling confusion and desperation? Of course, we're looking for awareness and flow in everything that we do, as much as we possibly can. The other measure that we can look at is to how successful you're feeling when you're doing something. Sometimes this can be hard to measure. For example, when I'm doing mind maps, there's no real way for me to measure if I'm successful or not. But are you getting it right 50 to 80% of the time? This might be more deliberate practice on something. If you're practicing how to play the guitar, if you're practicing how to play a musical instrument of any sort, really, that would be much more likely to be able to be measured by a percentage. Then it's about game time adjustments. So while you're practicing, you might need to make something a little bit easier. While you're doing something, you might need to make something a little bit harder. Sometimes you'll need to turn up the dial, and sometimes you'll need to turn back the dial. There's no way for you to kind of plan exactly what type of practice you're going to do on the day and have it be exactly in the sweet spot. You might have to make it a little bit easier, make it a little bit harder, play around as you're going throughout the day. The next big idea here that I've highlighted in gold because I think it's so important is the skill. With deep practice, small daily practice snacks are actually more effective than once a week practice binges. This is a huge change for me. The reason that it's more successful and more effective has to do with the way that our brains grow. They grow incrementally, a little bit each day, even as we sleep. Daily practice, even for 5 minutes, nourishes this process, while more occasional practice forces your brain to play catch-up. Or, as the musical education pioneer, practice on the days that you eat. Practice on the days that you eat, so practice every day. The other advantage of practicing daily is that it becomes actually a habit. The act of practicing, making time to do it, doing it well, can be thought of as a skill in and of itself, perhaps the most important skill of all. Give it time. According to research, establishing a new habit takes about 30 days. Of course, we've talked a lot about habits already on the channel. I recommend that you check out Atomic Habits by James Clear or Tiny Habits by BJ Fogg, both really great books on the subject. So really what this is about is how often, the frequency that we're practicing with. The great people in any field, whether it's business, whether it's sports, whether it's music, practice every single day. And actually, Daniel tells us that it's the number one skill of successful people is the ability to practice often. Their ability to get into deep practice every single day, ideally. Now, this doesn't mean you have to grind yourself into the dirt every day at practice. Of course, we talked about finding this sweet spot right before this. Really what it means is just taking spaced repetition. And we've talked so much about this in all of our books on learning. I talk a lot about this inside of my course on learning. But focus deeply for a shorter period of time, every day or multiple times a day, versus focusing just on a shallow period for a long amount of time. This is a huge change in the way that most of us are practicing any skill. Most of us are learning by forcing ourselves to sit in a chair and read a book or watch a video or do a course for 3 or 4 hours at a time, instead of doing 30 minutes, 45 minutes at a time, and then taking a small break. And again, on a larger scale, we want to focus every day rather than one big practice every single week. So if you're trying to learn how to play a musical instrument, don't just wait until you're getting into the practice room with your teacher. Actually practice a little bit, 15 minutes, 20 minutes, 45 minutes every single day by yourself. Because really what we're doing here is, number one, it's better for our brains. That's how we learn. We learn incrementally. We grow a little bit each day. We don't grow all at once. But we're also building this habit of practicing. Basically, in order to get good at anything, you actually need to just get good at practicing. You need to get good at showing up to the practice. And the best way to make sure that happens is, of course, to develop the habit of practice. Pick something really, really small. Of course, thanks Tiny Habits again. I recommend that you go check that video out. But you can practice it just for 2 minutes a day at first. If you're trying to play the guitar, if you're trying to learn a new subject, if you want to dive deeply into reading or something like that, practice it just for 2 minutes a day at first. But make sure that you keep up the habit. Make sure you do it every single day and don't break the chain. Eventually, grow your time every single day. Go from 2 minutes to 3 to 5 to 10 to 15 every single day. That's how you successfully learn, and that's also how you build the habit of practicing, which, of course, the habit of practicing is going to help you in the short term get better at whatever you're trying to do, but also the skill, the habit of practicing is the most important habit that we can actually build. Next one is nap, ? This is one of my favorite tips. Napping is common in talent hotbeds and features both anecdotal and scientific justification. I love this one as well. The anecdotal, of course, is Albert Einstein was great at physics, and he was really good at his daily post-lunch 20-minute snooze. Other famous nappers include Da Vinci, Bonaparte, Churchill, Edison, Reagan, Kennedy, and Rockefeller. Spend time with any professional athletic team, and you'll find they're also professional nappers, which is very interesting. I didn't know that before this book. The science is in. Napping is good for the learning brain because it helps strengthen the connections formed during practice and prepare the brain for the next session. Of course, need I say more? You probably don't need a ton of convincing to take more naps in your day, but really, it's difficult to get the time, really, isn't it, right? Perhaps you're worried that taking a nap will bring you down in your productivity level because you won't have as much time to work. Some of the most productive people, the most influential people in the entire world, Da Vinci, Bonaparte, Churchill, just crazy influential people, were nappers. They used to take naps. And the science is honestly pretty clear as well. Memories, learnings, and connections in the brain get solidified when we sleep. All the practice, learning, and work you do during the day doesn't actually stick, doesn't mean anything if you actually don't get good night's sleep, and a nap can certainly be a part of that. So when might you nap? Well, I tend to think the lunchtime nap is a good place to go, but most of us won't really have time to fully doze off. So instead, I say that we just lay down. Close your eyes and focus on your breathing for 20 minutes. If you fall asleep for 15 of those 20 minutes, that's amazing. If you fall asleep for 2 minutes, that's amazing. If you don't fall asleep at all, well, this is meditation, right? But to me, it's really like a nap, just allowing your brain to switch modes. And also, this is talked about inside of A Mind for Numbers. She talks about how we have 2 different modes in our mind. We have the focus mode and the diffuse mode. The diffuse mode is the relaxation mode. And of course, napping is one way to get into the diffuse mode, but meditation is another spot. If you don't think that an extra 20 minutes of meditation is worth it in your day, I'm not sure what to tell you. Maybe you'll rather take a nap. Sometimes it can be hard to fall asleep in 20 minutes, though. Our next point here is about framing. And this is another gold point because I think this is a very, very overlooked point that this is probably the thing that I help coaching clients with the most. There's a moment before every rep when you're faced with a choice. You can either focus your attention on the target, what you want to do, or you can focus on the possible mistake or what you want to avoid. This, of course, is just a very simple tip. Always focus on the positive move and not on the negative one. For example, A golfer lining up a putt should tell herself, center the stroke, not don't pull this putt over to the left. A violinist faced with a difficult passage should tell himself, nail that A flat, not oh boy, I hope I don't miss this A flat. Psychologists call this positive framing and provide plentiful theories of how framing affects our subconscious mind. The point here is, it always works better to reach for what you want to accomplish, not from what you want to avoid. So really for me, this is all about how we're approaching not only just practice, but our lives in general. Really how we approach any situation, any obstacle, any practice could be more important than the obstacle or practice itself. How many reps does it take to get good at something? Of course, it varies on what you're trying to learn. But one thing that you can be sure of is that it takes more reps if you place your focus on what not to do rather than what you should do. It's kind of like dieting in my experience. It's a lot easier to focus on eating more healthy food than it is to focus on eating less food in general because you start to feel a little bit deprived. So why would we focus on positive framing, right? Isn't negative framing going to motivate us to be better? That's what I used to think. But really, inside of his book, What to Say When You Talk to Yourself by Dr. Shad Helmstetter, he explains that the mind will just believe whatever you tell it. It's not a very sophisticated device in this respect. And it just simply doesn't understand context. So the mind can't tell the difference between don't miss this shot and miss this shot. So if you're worried about what you don't want to do, the mind can't really see the don't in front of that. It's just going to think about missing the shot. It's kind of like if I say, don't think about a fuzzy pink elephant. What are you thinking about right now? A fuzzy pink elephant. So you have to be very careful with the way that you're framing things. You can see here we want to talk about what we do want to do and not what we don't want to do, right? Think about what we want to do and leave what we don't want to do alone. And for me, this is all about actually setting up cues, right? So this is difficult to do in the moment. But taking a little bit of a page out of Dr. Shad's book here, notice yourself framing something in a negative way, right? So if you're saying don't miss this shot, or if you're saying don't miss this note, right? Just notice it. It requires you to be a little bit mindful while you're doing the practice. But if you can be a little bit mindful and notice yourself not being able to actually get away from worrying about the negative, notice that first. And then step number 2 is to do your best to let go of that negative frame. It's not very easy to replace it with a positive frame before you've let go of the negative frame. Realizing that the negative frame is actually going to harm you in the long run, even though your brain thinks it's going to help. Step number 3 is to replace that with a new positive frame. Instead of talking about what you don't want to do, let's think about what we do want to do. That's framing, positive framing. And not only does that work for practice, which is what we're talking about today inside of the talent code, but that works in almost every single area of your life. Try to frame things in the positive way. Try to look on the bright side, so to speak. Of course, that's a cliche, but it's a cliche for a reason, because it actually works. Our next point here is blue collar. From a distance, top performers seem to live charmed and cushy lives, right? We see super successful people in mansions, and we see sports players playing your favorite sport for a living. When you look closer, however, you'll find that they spend a vast proportion of their life intensely practicing on their craft. Their mindset is not entitled or arrogant. It's 100% blue collar. They get up in the morning and go to work every day, whether they feel like it or not. As the artist Chuck Close says, inspiration is for amateurs. And that also comes directly out of Stephen Pressfield's book as well. Top performers are blue-collar workers. Wow, that's quite a shift. Every day they simply just show up. Most days it's repetitive practice on the basics. And some days they don't feel like going. Of course, just like any of us don't feel like going. Every day they probably leave a little tired, more tired than they showed up. And really, this is actually their secret, right? They look like they're living these charmed lives, as Daniel says here, or these amazing lives where they don't have to try very hard. And that's actually their secret. They keep showing up. They're insanely consistent. And that's how they stay ahead, compete at a high level, or finish a heck of a lot of projects. Simply showing up is 90% of the battle. And how can you stay consistent? That's really what this is all about. How can we stay blue collar? How can we stay consistent? Well, set the goal of showing up at X time on Y day instead of setting the goal to finish or win. So instead of setting yourself up with the goal of being a top performer, set yourself a daily goal. Remember, we talked about the skill. We talked about finding the sweet spot. We talked about showing up every single day as being the actual secret to a lot of people's success. Well, we should set the goal of showing up every single day. And we should set the goal of showing up instead of, hey, let's show up and I'm going to do these 5 things and I'm going to do them perfectly. We should actually show up and just show up in presence. If we can build up the habit of showing up each single day, we can show up the contest, the project, or the goal actually just ends up taking care of itself. If you show up and bring your presence every single day, work your best, attempt to find the sweet spot as much as you possibly can, the contest, the success, and etc. takes care of itself. However, on the opposite side, we end up spending a lot of time focusing on the end goal, and we tend to get discouraged. And of course, no one can be blamed for this because we all want to improve our skills quickly, today, if not sooner. But the truth is that talent actually grows really slowly. You would not criticize a seedling because it was not yet a tall oak tree, nor would you get upset because your skill circuitry is on the growth stage. Instead, build it with daily, deep practice and just showing up. To do this, it helps to think like a gardener and work like a carpenter. I heard this saying at Spartak. Think patiently without judgment. Work steadily, strategically, knowing that each piece connects to a larger whole. Work steadily, knowing each piece connects. For me, this is such an important point. Focusing on building with a plan in mind, but just continuing to show up. Such an important point. Often, of course, as I talked about before, we focus our efforts on the end goal, trying to do everything that we can to get there as quickly as possible. This often leads to things like shortcuts, unhappiness, disappointment, when we can't actually control the speed at which we improve. Consistent mindful attention to the moment. Now, I know you're probably saying, what is this hippie talking about? We're trying to improve our talents and our skills and be successful. But consistent, mindful attention to the moment is the most important skill that you can learn after just showing up. This, again, is all about showing up. Being willing to work hard and knowing that you're contributing towards your goal, of course, but with a slight twist. Bring yourself to the moment fully. With awareness and intention is where the true change happens. This is the Carpenters Garden. Focus on the now. Focus on what you can control right now. And focus on finding the sweet spot instead of focusing on the getting it done right now. Again, it's very difficult because we all want to improve our skills quickly. We all want to be successful quickly. We all want to get the project done quickly, if not sooner. But the more we can just show up and work steadily, knowing that each piece is going to end up connecting on the long run, the more successful we're going to be. Thanks for being with me here today. I wanted to let you know that you can get all of my courses and masterclasses all at themindmapguy.com. There's a link below down in the description. All of the courses are on sale right now, and if you buy a course, you get 1 hour of free coaching with me, which is a really great deal because, of course, the courses are actually a lot cheaper than a coaching session. With that, I'm going to leave you and hopefully see you in the next one.